Well, hey everyone, welcome into the Striker Texas MLS Podcast. Jon Arnold here in rainy Dallas, Texas. Victor, it looks like you're weathering a storm in Houston as well.
It's raining too. We got a tropical storm.
Chris Bils in Austin. What do you think? Is it raining?
It is. It's a bit drizzly.
Wow.
Definitely dark.
Yeah.
Definitely hard to get up the morning after a game day. But we're here and we're ready to go. Let's go.
This is not a weather show. This is a Texas MLS show, but, it's interesting to get perspectives from around the country. Not only Victor looking in on the Houston Dynamo, but the U.S. men's national team actually in Houston as well, ahead of their trip to Mexico City for a pretty important game in World Cup qualification. We'll talk a little bit about that because FC Dallas had two of those players, Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola, on the score sheet 3 times for Jesus. Had a hat trick in his career. FC Dallas wins 4-1 over the Portland Timbers to keep the good vibes going in Frisco, in Houston, and in Austin. Just 1 point. Nothing to be upset about. Get into the perhaps disappointing moments in Austin. But let's start, guys, with again those good times rolling. Jesus, I had asked Nico Estevez through the first 3 weeks. Hey, you're a little worried about Jesus Ferreira. This is supposed to be your number 9. This guy's supposed to be banging in the goals. So far, he's missed all his opportunities. It's the only time that I would say Nico sort of laughed off a question of mine so far. He was like, no. I'm not worried at all. I'm not worried even in the slightest. Once the opportunities come, he's going to score. And once he scores, he's going to keep scoring. We didn't know in 10 minutes because Jesus Ferreira scores 1 goal, scores 3 goals.
Now?
The eighth fastest hat trick in terms of, time scored in Major League Soccer history. MLS comes out a little bit slower in half, understandable with the 3-0 lead. Portland does get a goal back, but then FC Dallas again, that Arriola connection. Jesus turns provider, sets up Paul Arriola, and FC Dallas is enjoying wins in a row and 7 points heading into the international break. Chris, this is good news if you're a U.S. national team fan because there's question marks at the 9, and if Ferreira, who did everything but score, is kind of known for, I think, is he can come back and link the play. He can defensively win a ball in the midfield. He can set up and link players, play that between the midfield and the wingers, and now he's also scoring goals. It's like, oh, okay. Going to do, then he could potentially start even Thursday at the Azteca.
Exactly. I mean, I think it is great news for U.S. men's national team fans, especially because he's playing in that same system that that the U.S. plays, and against the Portland defense that I saw them at Providence Park a week ago, and they were a fortress. They were hard to break down, and FC Dallas did the things that Austin wasn't able to do, which is they got the ball out wide. And they attacked well through Arriola. Great dummy by him on that first goal, and just really good by Jesus Ferreira to get into those positions and for FC Dallas to find him. The service was there, and like Estevez was sort of hinting at, if the service comes, he's got no problem putting the ball in the back of the net, and he showed that. So it was really impressive, I thought, from FC Dallas overall. To really go after Portland and do something that obviously Austin wasn't able to do, and nobody in MLS had been able to score, I think, more than 1 goal against Portland this year.
Well, Dallas was at home too, so I mean that helped them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you still got to go out there.
And it was a good atmosphere. I mean, I think we got to give credit to I don't always have the fans who are in the stadium. I think I generally have kind words for. Office has not necessarily done a great job bringing those fans into. There's an announced sellout. The capacity for soccer is apparently just over 19,000. The tickets they sold, and it was a good atmosphere. I mean, I sort of was thinking during the start of the game, like, if this was the baseline, soccer in Dallas would matter. Like, this is how many people were at these games. The supporters, El Matador, Dallas Beer Guardians. Like, it was energetic. It really felt soccer night. It felt like people cared. Now, look, a lot of things went in the right direction. I see Dallas won last weekend. The weather was gorgeous. It was like, I mean, in Texas we get these days a year where it's just like going to be outside no matter what. I had
Exactly.
my run in the morning, was hanging out on the balcony, just like outside, and I think everyone kind of had that vibe. There's some ticket specials on as well, but credit to the team starting to do something different. New marketing executive we profiled on the Striker Texas last month, Jerome Melendez, with experience working in this market. Look, we'll see. But so far, the atmosphere was good, and all the better when the fans are able to cheer. 3 goals in the first half by the same player, a homegrown player who came up through the system that you see succeed if you're a Dallas fan. And Victor, look, we talk a lot about like, hey, who are these players that are signing? Are these guys really difference makers? Alan Velasco didn't get on the score sheet, and honestly, he wasn't extremely influential in the game. But on that first goal, Chris brings up Araiza's dummy. As team move I've seen FC Dallas put together since the 2016 season. I mean, it was great understanding, great rhythm. Everyone's pass was in the right place, and the play is finished. Araiza's dummy's sick. Ferreira's finished nice, but that never happens if Velasco doesn't send that cross first time. And Victor, how many times do we see guys that come up in MLS or they're brought in as imports? They get that ball and they take a touch toward the line. It's a progressive touch. It gets you farther into the final third, but it kills the momentum of that play. Velasco, he has the knowledge and he has the vision to say, I gotta pound this in now, and it's in the right place and they score. It's the difference.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of players people want to see being brought into the league that will eventually, turn into stars in this league. I mean, we've said the potential of Velasco. Yeah, I mean, I think this requires maybe a little bit more thought, but I mean, could this have the potential to be the best front three in MLS? I mean, you got Araiza, Velasco, and if Ferreira keeps playing well. I mean, this looked dangerous.
Okay.
This looked really good. I thought, I was gonna. You answered my question. I was gonna ask you about the atmosphere in the stadium because it did look a little packed. I didn't realize it was a packed house. I mean, it seems like. I mean, arguably, FC Dallas had the best offseason of the 3 Texas teams, and good on them. Good on them for getting people in the stadium. The spectacle is getting there, which I think is the big part of it. It's huge. It's obviously something that has happened out there in Austin, and we're still kind of waiting a little bit more down here in Houston. But yeah,
even more, like the question about getting fans. The question about getting fans in is like, is it fun? And that's why I wrote last week before the Nashville game, like the stadium experience matters. But it doesn't matter as much when the team was as fun to watch as it was. It really was fun. And the guys in the article, the players I talked to, Nico, his coach said kind of, hey, like if we're doing our job, fans will want to show up. Like if we're winning, if we're creating a good atmosphere, like, on the field,
winning itself, I don't buy that. I mean, if you just have like these one nothing wins, I don't think people are going to be. Well, I mean, but I think also it's like, even if the team wins and it's boring, you back. Like 2016 is FC Dallas's most successful year. I'm not saying that the team was boring. Actually, we're playing some pretty fun soccer, and we'll get into some of the alumnus, Maxi Arruti, here in a moment, who was part of that team. Like there were good moments. There were beautiful passages of play. There were trophies, but the stadium environment itself wasn't that fun. But I think when house, when there's fireworks at the game, when everyone's engaged and cheering on the local boy, it's a different situation. And I'll let this one too.
Victor, the chemistry, could this be the best front three? I just want to focus real quick because, first of all, wow, conversation we thought we'd be having about FC Dallas in 2022 after 2021.
Right.
But second, I wrote in the 3 things that people can check out on the Striker Texas. My number 2 thought was that this Paul Araiza got here a month and a half ago. Alan here 2.5 weeks ago. The fact as good as they do right now is concerning MLS Western Conference. Now, it's not. I think it's good vibes, right? Great vibes right now. There's going to be times where guys are not finishing. There's going to be a time where there's going to be times where guys on international duty and come back out of rhythm. That could even happen. You're missing 2 of those players, but last integrating, getting involved. So it's certainly not, hey, we're done, we did it. And I don't think that's FC Dallas's mentality either. And in addition to chatting about the other games, Austin's draw with Seattle and Houston draw with Colorado, I want kind of what the vibe is and what the approach is in a break, because I asked Nico Esteves, hey, you've got us now, and you're only missing 3 guys. Areola from Szabolcsön, the Hungarian winger. What do? Do you give him a lot of rest, a lot of hard work to get better? How do you keep this rhythm going? Because you don't want to lose the flow you have. You don't want to lose this positive vibe you have, but you got to keep sustaining it over the next 10 days before you're back in action. So Esteban, a mix of doing fun things, keeping involved, keeping things loose, but also things he's seen where he's like, oh my gosh, this, and we didn't get to it in the week because it wasn't the top 1, 2, 3, 4 priorities. So that's the approach FC Dallas is taking, this blend, but they also have the luxury of being able to say, heck yeah, things are working. We're just going to be able to chill. Chris, in Austin, where things are, similar, exact same point total, but a different order. What's the vibe heading into the international break? And then we'll get the story from Houston as well before we look into the games individually.
No, I think that was what stood out to me. I watched the highlights the other night, but I just kind of did a refresher before we got on here of the FC Dallas match. And I think what stood out to me is something that has also stood out through Austin's first 4 matches, which is just, for me, it was the joy on Paul Areola's face after he scored his goal, and also after the first goal for Jesus Ferreira. And you can tell that these guys are bought in, that they're enjoying their football right now, that they're enjoying each other, and there's a real togetherness about the group. And, I think that's what Austin has as well. Their ability to fight back in this one, down 1-0 is something that, I wrote in my piece. They only did that twice last year. Once was in that game at Colorado, where they went down 1-0 and were able to come back and win 3-1. And the other time was actually ended up being a loss, but they went down 1-0 at home against LAFC in September, I think it was. And then they were able to come back and equalize, but LAFC ended up getting the winner. In a 34 match season, you're going to want to come back more than twice. And they showed the ability, on Sunday to, after what I thought was probably the worst half of the season, they had a nice 10 minutes stretch to start the match. And then, Seattle really took over even without the stars. I thought Seattle was really sharp and really good, and Austin was not, and they got caught out, on the goal. But, to have Diego Fagundes come off the bench, Maxi Ruti come off the bench, those guys, were upset that they weren't in the starting lineup, but they took it and channeled it into, bringing some energy and the adjustment. Yeah,
I wanted to ask you about that because I'm not Wolf out guy, but I do think, did Josh Wolf overthink this? He had a good starting 11, he had a good flow, and then he kind of pulls 2 guys off, especially when it looked like they were just having a good South American connection there, right, between Cecilio and Fagundes.
And when you have a break coming out the back, right? That's the other thing, is that you it's one thing if it's like we got to rotate for fitness, and maybe that's still part of the case here, Chris, you tell us, but like it did seem strange to me when it's like, hey, you're the rested team and you're getting the international break after this.
It's worth talking about for sure. And I think that, like, did he overthink it? I think, there's definitely some merit to that argument, especially when he talks after the game. He wanted more of a presence in the box with the physicality that Musajite brings. But also, guys, Maxi Ruti, while he's been really, good in the press and aggressive, and he hasn't really been convincing as a finisher. And so I think he wanted to give Musajite a chance to start. And, he found out, right? Like, Musajite had a couple chances in the first half. He scuffed a shot inside, almost inside the 6 that, went off, I think, Alex Rings back, and then easy save for Stephen Cleveland. And, as far as Ethan Finley, trying to add a little bit more verticality, and sort of the same thing, like Diego Fagundes hasn't necessarily been convincing, and you saw what it did for him to be on the bench. He came in and he was able to get the goal. And, we were able to talk to him after the match, and, he didn't want to be on the bench. But, Ethan Finley's pushing for that spot. And I think, from a standpoint of keeping guys engaged and knowing that you're going to need all these guys, I think that there's some merit to that. But, the actual moves didn't necessarily work, obviously, in the first half. So, credit to the players that did come in the second half for making those adjustments and getting it done.
Before we look deeper into that Austin draw with Seattle, I wanted to ask Victor about the vibes heading into the international break for the Dynamo, where the point total isn't as high. The chemistry doesn't necessarily look as strong. And even these bonds that Chris and I are mentioning, where you just sort of see Paul Arriola grinning and hugging Alan Velasco and these celebrations that pop off after a goal. Well, Houston hasn't scored as many, so there haven't been as many chances. But is there the same vibe there in Houston? Are things good?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get a 90-minute game-tying goal and everybody leaves home happy, when it could have been a loss and it could have been, a little bit of a bittersweet, all right, finally got the first win, but weren't able to follow it up. I think the way it ended up, yeah, a little bit. I mean, because at the end of the day, there's an up arrow next to the Houston Dynamo, right? That's the biggest thing. But I mean, I still think there's a lot more questions now, right? There's as you said, we're gathering more data on this team on these teams, but yeah, there's still more question marks. The Ferreira up there in Dallas is getting 3 goals, but the Ferreira down here in Houston hasn't scored one, and he's getting less playing time. You can read about that on my 3 things. What's the situation now with Tim Parker? I do think you do got to give credit to these coaches, right? Like Wolf, in this case Nagamura, not afraid to make switches, right? If they think it's going to be better for the team. So he benched his, according to what he's saying. Right?
All right. So you said give credit to Wolf for making the change. Give credit to Wolf for making the change. But just like 5 minutes ago, you were like, you got in the chemistry of this team. Is he supposed to change or not, Victor?
Well, I think he might have gotten the wrong changes, but at least you know what? I do appreciate the personality to make those changes, right? I mean, I think here in Houston, maybe a guy like Tim Parker might have thought his position was safe, and it looks like maybe it isn't. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he wants him to cut down some weight, wants him to be a little quicker, leaner. I don't know. And with the same thing with Ferreira, I mean, this is a guy that the team invested a lot of money in, but that doesn't mean you're not going to give the super draft pick an opportunity, right? And he's been good off the bench, Doro Farson. So, but again, I think some questions begin to get answered. I think I told you last week. I mean, why not spend those $4 million they spend on Ferreira in the midfield? And look, you had a guy in the super draft, and now you're looking at maybe that could have been a forward you start nurturing. Ultimately, I think the problem with this team continues to be enough creativeness in midfield. They didn't have enough to generate the goals to beat Colorado. And honestly, Colorado sat back. I mean, there is something to say for that. I mean, some of these results, we have to analyze them a little deeper. Vancouver scored a goal and they sat back. Colorado came in and they defended the 1 goal they had. And I mean, so in that sense, Houston maybe a little lucky. But yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a lot to assess here for Nagamura over the international break. I think the big question is Ferreira going to be the starter coming back? Because he's with Paraguay. That's a long trip, and we've seen that play against Dynamo players. Teenage Adebe just getting his first start this last game.
Mm-hmm.
We Twitter Spaces before the game about Alberto Carrasquilla, also a guy going on international duty, critical games for Panama. They're do or die. They might make the World Cup. They do this cycle. I guess you could say
right.
The same about the United
Shorter
States.
Shorter distance Panama, though. Yeah. And a
playoff,
much more influential player.
It is, but it's still possible he plays 90 minutes of 2 games and 75 of another. But I thought it was in the week, the piece you wrote, the chat you were able to have with him about his continuity with the team. And you're seeing him be quite important and influential. So, tell us about him and his influence and what he told you before the game.
Yeah, well, I still think he's the most important player on this team because he's the guy that helps you defensively. I mean, he had some plays here in this game against Colorado where, I mean, I remember one play in particular where he just cuts off the Colorado attack, and if he's not there, I mean, he was essentially the last line of defense. Colorado's on their way, and they're free one-on-one against Steve Clark. Not to credit, Steve Clark has also been a solid pickup. Provided very good saves to keep the Dynamo in the game. But yeah, I think Carrasquilla is a very important piece. Again, just the fact that you bring in a guy like Herrera alongside him, the opportunity to have 2 of these guys managing your midfield, I think that's why more so you have to jump on this opportunity and complete that trident in midfield. I mean, if there was one thing I think I mentioned is that I think the game against Vancouver, that's what you can expect against Darwin Quintero, from Darwin Quintero, right? Maybe, 65, 70 solid minutes against, maybe I'm being harsh, inferior MLS competition, right? But when you get, from middle of the table up, games like, teams like Colorado, more often than not, Quintero's not going to be as effective. That's why, and Carrasquilla is, you know what you have out of Carrasquilla every game. There's reports that there's a Brazilian winger on the way, right? Maybe he gets implemented here in the international break, Thiago. How much is he going to help? I think that's another thing, having an outlet. Maybe that might be something that can help you as well in having the midfield have that outlet, having a guy like Quintero have younger guys around him. But ultimately, I still think you need that one extra piece.
Let's go to Austin and digest that game a little bit, Chris. A game in which we talked before on the Twitter Spaces that people can check out on twitter.com. It's a social network that's doing microblogs. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but we talked about how the Sounders were rotated, that it was a different looking team, same as last time they came to Q2. Last time they were able to get a big result. This time they're able to get a 1-1 draw. Look, on the one hand, it's the Sounders. Like we say, they're weakened and rotating, and yet Albert Rusnak starts. He would start for almost every MLS team. Will Bruin starts. He's still, a guy who has a ton of value, who Texans know well from his time in Houston. João Paulo starts. He starts for every MLS team. And even like Stephen Cleveland, he's the back.
He was really good in this one.
We saw he's a good goalkeeper. This is a team that even when they rotate, they're very good. That said, a feeling the 2 points might have escaped here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to get too deep into that narrative of, this Seattle team's actually good, but I mean, I don't think that that's any secret. I think if you put this roster and you put them in Colorado Rapids uniforms, I don't doubt that they would, potentially make the playoffs, right? Like if, the 11 that was on the field. I mean,
I see what you're saying. You're saying if you took this team and made them their own team. I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I got you.
Sorry. But I thought that, you're still at home and you're against a weakened opponent. You've got to go out and get the 3 points. But again, credit where credit's due. They had a bad half. They came back out, and I thought they were the better team in the second half. And they were pushing for a winner after getting that goal from Diego Fagundes, 20 minutes, and Stephen Cleveland makes at least one outstanding save. On the header from Ruben Gabrielson and another really good one earlier in the match as well. But the one thing I wanted to touch on as well when we're talking about lineup decisions is the fact that Ruben Gabrielson, after making that mistake last week in Portland, a good 90 minutes, but makes one mistake. And this one, Josh Wolf said it after the match as well. It was, while Jean Kolmanich he left his men behind. That was part of the plan. The Sounders had the ball, and Austin wanted to press, and so the left back goes up. The rest of the back line's got to slide, and they left Christian Roldan in all kinds of space on that right side. And we can talk about whether he was offside or not.
I think he's offside. I wanted to bring that up with you because you tweeted screenshots and you kind of said, "Hey, like I'm not sure if you can tell from these angles," and I'm like, I think he's offside. Like I think I can tell, but I understand your point that the referees can only work with a video assistant referee, and the moment only has access to so many shots, and it's without the technology that we see used in the Premier League, which at least I don't want in MLS. I don't want to see more of these weird graphs and these lines being maneuvered. But to me, it
would be helpful in a situation like this. Yeah, it would be helpful in a situation like this. Where the camera angles from Fox Sports 1 were not very helpful, right? Nick Lima is the farthest guy back. Talked to some people that were down on the field. It wasn't Ruben Gabrielson that was the line, which is the one that I think everybody's looking at on those FS1 shots. And believe it or not, I did get an answer back from Pro after the match, from their pool reporter process, and they said that there was an angle that they were able to see after the match. I'm guessing it was the second spectrum tactical. It was a non-broadcast panoramic view, and they say that that shows that Roldan was onside.
The call was correct.
That the call was correct, and But that angle was not used by the VAR, so there was no definitive angle, so they had to go with the call on the field. So the assistant referee, lucky or not, it seems got this one right. I'm sure Austin fans will be begging to see that camera angle. I'm not sure that it'll ever come to light, but at the end of the day, I think what I wrote and what I think is that that's a mistake you can't make it in a moment like that. You can't leave a guy who's about to go on national team duty with 30 yards of space. Ruben Gabrielsen's got to rotate, got to come over. And, Jean Colbin, if he's going to press, he's got to commit to it. I thought he was like maybe sort of in a half space there trying to decide whether to go or whether to not go. And, they got caught out, and Will Bruin, credit to him on the finish, just kind of bundles it in, physical battle there with Julio Cascante, and he won it. But, we've seen that from Will Bruin over the years. But, then it becomes a game where you can hang your heads and be like, oh, here we go again. Or you can go into halftime, make the adjustments. And, I thought they came out and did well. But
and get a point. Yeah. I mean, it's
a
strong
they get a
half,
point.
Right?
It is a strong second half. They get a point, but you'd like to have all three. And that's where I think that you look at the standings, and as Victor said, like it seems like there's a hierarchy, but there's, everybody down to like the 10th position has at least 4 points in this thing. And two of the teams that are fighting outside the playoff race are the two that Austin FC, just picked up 1 point in 2 matches against in Portland and Seattle. And that they're not going to be below the playoff line for that long. So, you've got to take advantage of these opportunities when they come at home. And this was 2 points dropped at the end of the day.
I think it was a good point from, I believe, my buddy David Goss over on Extra Time. In the preview of this game, he was saying, it's kind of crazy to think that John Gallagher was like kind of one of your best attacking choice year, and now he's like the guy you toss in the 82nd minute if you need like another body to kind of. I mean, like his position is dropped, and I think it's not the way. I mean, that's the way it should be.
I think that's. I look at Houston and I say the same thing. I mean, I keep mentioning. I mean, there's a lot of guys here that they're great compliments. They're great guys to bring off the bench. But if you put them as starters, I mean, your team's not going to do so well. That's why you got to import some talent or bring in whether from inside the league, trades, whatever. And you got to make this a stronger team, like Dallas has done.
And Austin is much stronger, but I mean, there are still some positions that I've got questions about. One being, is Kip Keller actually, should he be starting at center back? And the other one is, is Austin going to get a goal from a center forward, right? Because you've got to, like Jesus Ferreira showed, you got to have somebody that's in those positions and that can actually finish off those chances. Because Sebastian Driussi and Diego Fagundes and Cecilio Dominguez, good as they are, they're not going to be able to break down every single defense, from the midfield and from the wings.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's early. So the big question for me is to this back line or a habitual issue. Are we talking about this guy the same way that we talk about Francisco Calvo or these other center backs who have been in MLS who you're like, oh, they're good every 3 games or whatever, because they just kind of keep making these small individual mistakes quite costly over the course of the season. Right? I mean, I think it's way too early to say, are way too small, but if I'm an Austin fan, that's where I'm a little worried. Center forward's a good one too. Don't get me wrong, but I think the goals come from other places enough that you say, or from the wings. If we can score, then we're probably not in that much of an issue, as long as we don't keep soft goals every game or every 2 games. Guys, all 3 of us are home this week.
Opportunities against Portland and Seattle.
For sure. Great thing, good, hand up. I mean, we're all here. It's not as exciting.
I went to the Hideout last night and got a burger. So might be my new post-game spot. I mean, saw some Austin FC fans out there after the game.
Well, I mean, it's your hideout, but if people want to, pigeonholes and get these thoughts before the Monday morning podcast, then try and check out the Hideout. Support local businesses. We always in Dallas, Austin, and Houston. And we'll tell you more about it next time. If we're going to do a podcast next week, guys, we haven't talked about this, but listeners, show next week. There's no MLS matches. I will be around the CONCACAF region, so we might take a break.
Yeah,
listeners will take a break. If we hear from you that we don't deserve it, then maybe we'll come back and try and do a show. Likely, we'll talk to you again in 2 podcasts. Stay dry, stay warm. For Victor Araiza in Houston, Chris Bils in Austin, I'm Jon Arnold in Dallas, reminding you, get every insight over there. And your support of that helps us keep doing it. On the Striker Texas MLS Podcast.